Years ago, indie games weren't taken very seriously. They were considered just games to pass the time away from the supposed AAA heavy hitters. Obviously, that has changed over the years because indie games have proven far and away to be better than many AAA games. And today, I want to go over 20 indie games that are perfect for you. First up, at number 20, we have Deep Rock Galactic. So let's start things off with a bang with one of the best team-based multiplayer games to exist outside of Left 4 Dead. Deep Rock Galactic takes the concept of those games, but adds randomized maps, more shooter elements that give it more of an Earth Defense Force feel, and allows for destructible environments while still ensuring the pacing is breakneck. It's impressive and also incredibly fun, even if you've got nobody to play with. The co-op stuff is the main feature here, but strangely, the single-player experience is also pretty solid. You can go at it alone with a little AI drone buddy, and that helps prevent things from getting overwhelming. The fact that you can go at it alone and it's fun and keeps the pacing right is actually kind of shocking. I was surprised by that when I jumped into single-player expecting like Left 4 Dead as opposed to Deep Rock Galactic. It's definitely like a secondary way to play long-term, but it's more fun here than most games of this type. If you're looking at this and thinking it's just Minecraft with space dwarves, you've been lied to. This thing's a co-op horde shooter wrapped in cave-ins and panic. It is a Left 4 Dead style game that actually does a really good job balancing the Left 4 Dead stuff with a lot of other stuff, and even better. Coming in next at number 19, we have Hades. Hardcore action games aren't generally the first thing that comes to mind when you think of tiny indie games, but Hades is not your average indie game, and it is kind of unfair to call Supergiant Games a small-time indie studio, right? But what they've done here far surpasses most roguelikes, and many roguelikes are a lot of fun. But Hades carves out a special place for itself. And there's a lot of reasons for that, like the fantastic Greek mythology-inspired story, the often funny dialogue, the absolutely perfect controls, and a surprisingly diverse cast of characters that aren't just one-note NPCs, but well-developed characters you get attached to. In fact, they do something interesting that we don't often see. We do indeed occasionally, but they have NPCs on the battlefield that they sort of bring into the story. It's actually cool, and of course, each loss doesn't feel like a loss in this game. There's your standard roguelike progression, but also a story that progresses, which you sometimes wouldn't expect, but it does. And it keeps you wanting to come back, and they somehow make failing fun. Next up, we have Ori and the Will of the Wisps. The original Ori game, I'd say it's a solid 8. Maybe you could argue it's a 9, but in my opinion, the sequel is a solid 10 out of 10. Will of the Wisps manages to be even more beautiful and mesmerizing than the first game, which is impressive for sure. That game also takes the gameplay to new heights with better-paced Metroidvania-inspired exploration and more polished movement, which is where the first game shines a lot, so that it gets better is all the better. Also, let's not forget about the jaw-dropping boss battles, which are some of my personal favorites. The first game is great, but the second game is so close to perfect, it's just crazy in my opinion. My only real gripe with it is the map is somewhat annoying. For whatever reason, you can't always rely on it to tell you where doors are. It's just not very clear or useful for anything other than telling you where you are. And it gets a lot less effective the more you progress and the more you need it. In a game like this, it's usually more useful. That's the thing though, it's nitpicks really otherwise. Otherwise, it's just pure platforming goodness, and it's a fun little place to visit for a few hours. Next on the list, we have Hollow Knight. There have been countless Metroidvania games post this one, but let's be real, Hollow Knight is still the true king of its particular subgenre. At this point, there's no denying what it is. Is it my favorite? No, and you're probably actually going to boo me if I do tell you my favorite Metroidvania. But go ahead and guess in the comments before you say how awful I am for having that opinion. We'll just go ahead and talk about Hollow Knight though. Everything about it kind of rules when we're talking about level design, the controls, the music. In spite of the fact that it's not my personal favorite, it pretty much perfects the formula established by Metroid and Castlevania games and combines it with a little bit of the Souls-style storytelling. And what's amazing about it is, it's not really an entirely original game. It doesn't take a lot of work to pick out its inspirations, but it all comes together in an incredibly satisfying package, a lot thanks to excellent map and encounter design and the atmosphere. You could really just get absolutely lost in this world, and considering how cheap it was even when it came out, it's an impressive game in a lot of ways. I mean, there's a reason people are hyped for the sequel, Hollow Knight Silksong, and it may not be my absolute favorite of this type of game, but it is a top-tier indie for sure. Now at number 16, it's Blasphemous 2. The original Blasphemous was a great game, no doubt about it, but Blasphemous 2, to me, perfects that formula. It's got more boss fights, more abilities, and a more open-ended world to explore. There are a hell of a lot more secrets to uncover as well. This game goes nuts in terms of how much is hidden away, without feeling like it's being shoved in your face like in most games of this type. You can find characters without ever realizing it, and if you're not using a guide, it's possible to find them on repeated playthroughs without even realizing what you missed. That's the beauty of Blasphemous 2, how flexible it is, and how easygoing it is about how you approach the game. The art direction here is insane. Everything feels iconically religious. I mean, it's called Blasphemous. They obviously put a lot of time into making all these weird, beautiful, often grotesque pixel art locations, and some of the bosses are incredible in a lot of ways that might be hard to stomach. Yes, even some stomach-related ones. It's visceral, it's weird, it's intentionally confusing, but it's a damn nearly perfect Souls-like Metroidvania. Moving to the next game, we have Disco Elysium, possibly the finest writing in the history of gaming. Disco Elysium is a triumph of dialogue and story without being obnoxiously verbose like so many games where people say it's about the writing, not the gameplay. There is some meat to this game beyond just reading the words, though that's a big part of it. In simple terms, it's a story-driven adventure game, but instead of the standard point-and-click kind of puzzles you'd expect, the puzzles are all in how you interact with the world. It's a story-based game, but it's shockingly open-ended, depending on how you want to role-play your character. The inscrutable cop, a crazy wildcard, or just a normal dude trying to solve a case. Your experience with the game can change dramatically. It's kind of amazing how often the game is able to tread that particular knife's edge, where it can be tragically sad and also funny as hell without ever feeling tonally dissonant. The wild swings don't feel like maybe Deus Ex, where it moves from serious to ridiculous and cheerful in a sentence. It feels like they're all things that go together. And while I talk a lot about the writing, it's not just the writing. The music's great, the voice acting, the UI, it all comes together perfectly. If I had to nitpick any part of the game, it's the final act, which I don't want to spoil, but it's a pretty big gear shift in both the themes that the story is trying to express, as well as the tone. It is a little jarring, but it's maybe a nitpick. This is a rare case where I can forgive the floundering ending because the rest of the game is just so good. But look, it's not the perfect game. Maybe not really a 10, but a 9.9 rating, at least in my opinion. Coming in next, at number 14, it's Stray, the only game on this list where you play as a cat. Stray is in a lot of ways the perfect chill-out game. You just wander around, explore, and solve a few puzzles. That's the core gameplay loop here, but there's more to it that makes it interesting. For one thing, you're not a human. You're a cat, and you can't talk to humans because, well, they no longer exist in this world. You can't really even easily navigate the world in the way you normally do. And you're in a world populated by, let's just say, the weird population of a near-future world. Most of your objectives are just sort of implied by the world. You're not really told anything. You're kind of solving problems by being a nuisance, by placing your cat paws on them and causing chaos, because that's kind of what cats do. And on top of the fun gameplay and interesting environment, the lay of the chill, ambient synth music is fantastic. And at various points, they kind of enhance that soundtrack to be more than just chill music. It's just a fun little game about being a cat, has all the right vibes, and while it's doing that, it's still smart. There can be a lot going on without saying or showing very much, and I really do appreciate that. There's not a lot to say otherwise. It's not a huge game. It doesn't have a lot of varied gameplay, but it's a fun experience. It's only 5 hours, but sometimes it's all you need, and it's worth finishing just for that weird and unexpectedly touching ending. Next on the list, we have Slay the Spire. To be clear, in order to call a game perfect, there has to be something exclusive to that game that is unique and that it executes that is perfect. Slay the Spire is not exactly my personal favorite deck builder roguelike, but it is maybe the purest one of them all. It's got great moment to moment. The mechanics are all fantastic. The art on the cards is excellent. The game is beautiful to look at. After a few more impressive clones of Slay the Spire, some people might look back on it and say, this game is a little bare bones. And in some ways, maybe yes, but I would hesitate to call it lacking because what it offers spectacularly. It may not have a ton of depth, but there's, 4 characters you can choose from in this game. But they're very different. They play completely differently. And the strategies you have to use to succeed with them have to be approached in unique ways. It's not a massive game, but it's perfectly executed, which I guess you could argue is kind of why it stands out. It has a relatively small scope, and it handles that scope perfectly. It's a simple game to explain. You build a deck, use cards to defeat enemies, simple, but the freedom it gives you to create your own strategies and unique builds is really what makes it interesting. Again, maybe not my personal absolute favorite, but that doesn't stop it from being the best and the most influential indie games. Coming in next, we have Darkest Dungeon. Okay, so this is a brutally difficult turn-based game where you explore randomly generated dungeons with parties of adventurers that can get depressed or scared to the point of becoming useless. Or there's always the potential intro of going crazy and losing their minds, and that causes them to mutate in a more positive way. This isn't a roguelike, but the systems Darkest Dungeon played with are pretty influential on quite a few games post its release. The actual game sort of feels adjacent to an old turn-based tactics RPG like Shining Force or something. But instead of smaller, tightly designed encounters, this game feels more random and dangerous. Like the entire world is out to get you, everything could be going fine, and suddenly one of your soldiers is screaming in terror and the rest of them are losing the will to go on, and things quickly fall apart. I wouldn't say this is a perfect game. Maybe I would say it's a perfect for what it is, as in it's a very niche game. It satisfies a specific set of conditions for a specific set of people, but it satisfies those conditions perfectly. And if you're into tactics games, it is really a fun take on the genre. It offers a lot of unique challenges, but if you're more of a casual player, it may seem like a bit much. For me, I'll be frank, I have to be in the mood for it, but there is nothing like it if you are in that mood. Next on the list, actually one of my favorite, it's Outer Wilds, the only game on this list where you're stuck in a time loop. This weird little outer space adventure game is great. It's a time loop game and it's a physics simulator. It keeps you in orbit through its awe-inspiring spectacle and bizarre premise. What Outer Wilds does especially well is that it makes space wondrous and legitimately engaging to explore. Most other space games fail because on paper it seems like space would be this whole mysterious unknown that gets you really vamped up to see what's out there. But in practice, it's not. Space is empty. It's empty, so it's boring. There's a reason that they say the frontier is nothing. Outer Wilds is, in contrast, absolutely brimming with creativity. Is it exactly representative of what space is going to be like when you actually get there? Yeah, probably not, but they figured it out. The feeling of gradually piecing together this mysterious world as you explore distant planets is like being part of an engaging sci-fi novel or doing an escape room that takes place in a time loop in space. You actually do have to think and piece things together. It's not just go somewhere and get told something. It actually, as a mystery game, works. It's one of the best exploration games ever made for sure, and it is just an underrated game. A lot of people don't know of it, and yes, it does share a name with Outer Worlds, which I think not very helpful. But Outer Wilds is just something that managed to perfectly do what it really intends to deliver. Now moving to number 10, we have Cuphead. I mean, to be frank, it's one of the best boss rush games of all time. The fantastic old cartoon-inspired aesthetics elevate it, and they're not even... Like, Cuphead's a game that didn't need to be elevated in the way some people might need to be. It's a brutally difficult but fair little shooter that is equal parts frustrating and fun. It's the kind of game where if you lose, you really only have yourself to blame. It's never too unfair. Sometimes they throw a curveball at you, but the game's like 95% pure, intense, skill-based gameplay. It's really hard as hell, so often exhausting to play and can make you want to rip your hair out, but it's not because of the game, it's because you suck, right? But kidding apart, that's actually what makes this game so engaging. When you finally beat that one boss that took hours, you feel like you accomplished something. It's not a big game, but it's a beautiful little labor of love full of charming, wacky boss fights, interesting locations, fantastic music, and pitch-perfect animation and gunplay. It's just good. It's just a good game. It's fun to play for bursts, like if you haven't played in a couple months, you're not gonna jump back in, probably play for several hours. But man, it does keep pulling me back in, and then I have beat all this stuff on it, so yeah, it is a great experience that you should try too. Next on the list, it's Spiritfarer. If managing a high-maintenance boat full of sometimes needy ghosts doesn't sound like a good time to you, man, I don't know what's wrong with you. It sounds like the best time to me. Well, I mean, in real life it doesn't, but as a video game on paper, that sounds fun, and as it turns out, it is. Spiritfarer is a strange one, but it's a beautiful, touching, really unique management-style game where you're building a home for a bunch of lost souls. It's kind of a lot of games at once. There's exploration, there's platforming, along with death management, some light crafting. It's got a little of everything, but unlike the old game where you'd have to constantly battle ghosts on your way as you're escorting them, this is much more of a chill, cozy type game. Still, for as comfy as it looks, it's a game that's still about death when you come down to it, and it's surprisingly effective in making attachments to some of these ghosts, some more than others. It's one of those games where it feels like everyone is going to react to it differently. For somebody else, this might be their favorite. It depends on your own experiences of people in real life. It's uniquely personal in a way you don't see in games, and as management games go, Spiritfarer does a lot to keep you moving and invested. It's surprisingly game-heavy for what's normally a very laid-back, gamer-friendly genre.
As a child, the house made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't put into words.
Now, at number 8, we have What Remains of Edith Finch. A good walking simulator is a rare thing. We get a lot of them, but they're all usually fairly shallow. Well, definitely not this one. What Remains of Edith Finch manages to capture the slightly unnerving feel of a Gone Home-style exploration game, but keeps the intrigue going without resulting in absurd jump scares or unexplained nonsense. It's a simple concept. You're exploring the rooms of a house and experiencing their past, but it's done in such a fascinating and compelling way. It keeps you wrapped the entire time because it is actually not a long game, but the effects linger. This is one of those games that a lot of people call pretentious because it doesn't follow normal game conventions, but what it's actually doing is coming up with a functional new set of conventions that are interesting, ones that work. They're not just padding for the runtime to make this look more like a video game. In fact, the only gripe I have for this game is, again, its short runtime. I think I completed it in 2.5 hours. So maybe this game might be a more experimental game, but it's a complete story with a real ending that leads to an emotional catharsis, at least for me. For real, one of the best games to play if you aren't a gamer, if you're not used to what a game is. It's pretty simple to pick up and get through it. It's not like there's a million things you can do with the controller and everything is relatively obvious in terms of what you're doing. So it's a great game to introduce normies to games. Coming in next, we have Battle Brothers. It's not often you see an actually good, low-budget attempt to recreate Mount & Blade's formula, but that's precisely what Battle Brothers is. It's a fantasy mercenary management game where you control a company of hired mercenaries down to the most detailed bits of bookkeeping. You set up contracts, hire more men, deal with Battle Brothers getting injured, dying, getting new equipment. There's a hell of a lot to keep track of, and that's even before you factor in the actual tactical gameplay. One long battle might take longer than an entire campaign of some games on this list, and it can be some absolutely brutal stuff. It's not an easy game to get into, and the randomized world means that it's entirely possible to have a completely failed run through no fault of your own, which is not easy to stomach. But look, that's all part of the fun. There's a lot of depth here. There are multiple approaches to playing. It's got that same feeling as XCOM where you really get attached to these guys and the band of killers you've created, but they're also just a couple of bad fights away from complete ruin. It's another one of those games that doesn't have mainstream appeal, but if you're a heavy strategy guy who enjoys systems, there is a lot to work with and figure out in Battle Brothers. Now at number 6, it's Dead Cells. A little bit Souls-like, a little bit Metroidvania mixed with roguelike elements. At the time, it was a real recipe for something this addictive. It's been developed to hell and back with countless updates, new areas to explore, new weapons, power-ups, all things meant to make the combat just even more frenetic and exhilarating. And it was already really, really fun when it first came out. And it's even better now. It's an incredible little action brawler with an old school approach and a modern sensibility. It gets all those fun gameplay elements from the past with some of the smartness of the kind of persistent progression of modern roguelikes. So it's tough but fair, and it feels like you're always making some kind of progress in either completing an area or finding a new power. It's just fantastic. And depending on what kind of weapons you find, it can have a very different feeling, again, sort of a hallmark of good roguelike. And Dead Cells understands the fundamentals of good game design on an almost absurdly deep level. It might not be revolutionary, but it executes a lot of games that came before it with such an absurd level of skill. It feels like an old Castlevania game, but with some of the stiffness removed in a way that makes it feel very fluid and fun. Up next, at number 5, we have Cult of the Lamb, one of the most unique roguelikes I've ever played. This is also the only game where you run a cult. I mean, I'm not talking about real life. There's a lot of real life cults. Be careful out there. They're tricky. They're not going to necessarily look like Cult of the Lamb. But in Cult of the Lamb, one of those roguelike games where the combat is great, but your base of operations is actually really fun and engaging. You can be gone for a while doing the actual gameplay. But when you come back, things to do at your little cult haven don't feel like busy work in the way it can sometimes in these types of games. They managed to make the management stuff actually interesting enough that it is a nice change of pace of killing endless masses of enemies as you crawl through dark, dangerous dungeons. It's a really beautiful looking game with a really fantastic art style that I would call Tim Burton meets The Binding of Isaac in terms of not just aesthetics, but also gameplay. And it works steadily, becoming its own thing the further it develops until the end game where there's nothing quite like it. It's, like I said, an interesting variation on something that's a very crowded genre. It's one that's easy to wrap your head around, doesn't overstay its welcome, and does have a lot of replayability and unique ideas. Just a pretty cool game in general. And at number 4, we have Return of the Obra Dinn. I feel like I've talked about this game a lot. Let's revel in it a little bit more, because in my opinion, it is fantastic. Everything about it, the old school aesthetics, the premise, the exploration gameplay, the length. This is one of those games where the final chapter perfectly closes this story without overstaying its welcome. It doesn't really drag much at all, and that is a rare thing for games. As much as I love games, I'll admit many of them have segments that drag and/or times when they just don't know when to wrap things up. Return of the Obra Dinn does not have that problem. Does that mean it's over too quick, though? Honestly, it might be a criticism that some people might bring up, but personally, I would not agree with that. It's just the right length. It's about exploration, escape room style, puzzle solving. They've got some of the best music in the business. It's a game that all comes together perfectly. The plot is surprisingly mysterious, like gradually figuring out what happened to this abandoned ship and the clues you find scattered throughout, like experiencing what seems like mundane events. But they take a turn into the fantastical or the apocalyptic. Everything kind of wraps up this captivating little enigma with a firm hook of having to identify what happened to every person on the ship. It keeps you invested, doesn't waste your time, is smart about how it exposits the story through the exploration. It's just a really good game. At number 3 is Stardew Valley, which I almost feel like is a lock for a 10 out of 10 indie list. It's the game that most people think of when they think of good indies in general too. It's just the perfect storm of addictive gameplay and surprise complexity and a very simple, easy to understand farming game. Stardew Valley perfectly captures the soul of Harvest Moon while iterating on every single thing that made those games great. Plus, it's a longer, more open-ended game than most games in this genre. Activities keep you busy as the seasons change. It keeps the game fresh as your farming career develops. It's the kind of game that just keeps on giving. It took a lot of elements that are essentially busy work on other games and made them actually fun, like the old school farming games, where collecting items actually feels like exploration, and farming feels like creating something, not just tapping a button repeatedly that gives you more money. You really want to see a return on your work in this game. and it's equal parts exhausting and relaxing to play in a good way. I hate saying things like it because it's been compared to it before, but there's nothing quite like Stardew Valley. And while it's not quite the phenomenon that Minecraft is, it also captured a lot of people's imaginations pretty quickly. Not a lot of games can have a festival dedicated to it, but that is the kind of cultural milestone Stardew Valley is. Plus, the thing that's really amazing about it, Stardew Valley was a 10 out of 10 when it was released, and it's gotten a hell of a lot of free updates that have improved it since. Now, down to number 2. I've talked about this game a lot, it's Journey. You've more than likely played it at this point, but like I said before, if a game deserves to be here, and I've talked about it before, I'm not excluding it because of that. Journey is one of those rare gaming experiences that anyone can actually enjoy because it's very simple to understand to what's going on, but if you want to dig, there's a lot of stuff going on, so that makes it enjoyable for a wide spectrum. I'll just call them different kinds of people. But in some ways, this is also just a non-verbal game where random people can help you along the way. It's exploration, it's traversal, it's some of the most gorgeous graphics you'll ever see. It's got this otherworldly soundtrack that is unforgettable. Look, there's not much meat to Journey. It's a short, very simple game, but everything about it is engaging on a very basic level. It might be a bit of an obvious one in retrospect, but Journey is well deserving of its classic status, in no small part thanks to the fact that there is no game quite like Journey. Like, you maybe want to compare it to Abzu, but it's not as good. You know what I mean? If you've played it, you know it, and you know that Journey is a great game. And finally, at number 1, the last but certainly not least, we have Sifu. So when I was making notes on this, I wrote for the masterpiece of a game, and I mean, that'd be underselling it. Sifu is a spectacular kung fu roguelike full of dense systems and bone-breaking action. That's the closest we've ever come to a good Jackie Chan simulator. This one's got it all in the combat department, but it does take a bit of getting used to. This is not a button masher. It is a game where you can only do well by actually learning and mastering its systems. But once it clicks, is it good? The Sifu guy controls like a dream. I know Dream is the takiest of a take of a take of a take. But on down from there, this Sifu guy is like that, and he's surprisingly versatile. It's not a simple game to play, but when fully engaged with, it just feels like the ultimate power fantasy. As far as Kung Fu is concerned, it's one of those games where once you know what you're doing, you'll find yourself constantly restarting and redoing whatever parts of the game because they seem exciting and fun now that you understand how the systems work. You can just pull off incredible Kung Fu sequences effortlessly in the game's beautiful locations. Now, the graphics and music both are excellent, along with the brilliantly conceived progression system. There's nothing else quite like this game, and I really hope we get more because I'll say that we're at 10 out of 10 as far as Kung Fu goes, and I do mean specifically Kung Fu with Sifu.